Doom afternoon, everybody, and welcome to DNN, the Doomers News Network, where we don't put any of that positive spin on all of the economic gloom out there. We just call it like we see it because somebody has to. And I am very fortunate today to be joined by my good friends Travis and Melody, who are here with us, as well as a special guest who we're going to hear from in just a few minutes. And I am going to turn it over to my good buddy Travis, who's on this side of me. Hey, Travis, how are we doing today, bud?
Doing fantastic, man. Just got back from my adventures in Denton County trying to expose some fraud, interviewed a whistleblower. Really excited to share that. But to the viewers, we have a very powerful flow today, very great stories. Obviously, Jack will lead with This Week in Doom. And then we're going to go into an interview of Mitch Wexler. Jack and Melody are going to ask him some questions about the economy and about what he's doing as far as the appraisal district fraud he's uncovering. Then we're going to go into the first story, which is the housing market collapse being imminent. I want to share with the viewers some important data and leading factors and why I think what I do. I think we're there. The next story is going to be by Melody, and she's going to go into systemic risk, both locally and geopolitically. We'll end with commercial real estate. Jack's going to take the lead on that. And then towards the end, guys, we're going to have a roundtable kind of led by Melody, and she's going to bring us all of the breaking, not all, but a lot of the breaking news on what's going on in the world. And you guys, it is a lot. And with that said, Jack, have fun, brother.
All right, everybody, it is time for This Week in Doom. And it has been a particularly doomy week, and I'm going to try to get through this in just 10 minutes, and there's a lot of doom to zoom through here, so why don't we just roll up our sleeves and head right into it. First things first, Monday, we started the week with the national debt crossing the $35 trillion threshold. You got to love that, folks. Just an entire third of all of the national debt, $11.8 trillion now, has been added just since the start of this wonderful decade that we call the 2020s. Every individual U.S. citizen share of the national debt is now $104,188. So congratulations to a baby born just this morning. He or she is already $104K in debt. What's the worst thing that could happen there? The share of debt per U.S. taxpayer is now $268,258. Oh, and by the way, did I mention $35 trillion in debt? Yeah, sorry, folks. Those numbers are now 6 days stale. The number is actually $35,127 billion. Already added another $0.127 billion just since Monday morning. But don't worry, guys. I'm sure our elected officials are all over that problem, and it's going to be solved just about any day now. On Wednesday this week, we got a surprise from the Bank of Japan. Here is BOJ Governor Kazuo Ueda, who somewhat surprised the world when the BOJ hiked their interest rate by 15 basis points on Wednesday. That's the second time this year they raised interest rates. The first was a ever so slight 0 to 0.1% interest rate. But now the rate is 0.25%, which isn't really all that high. But that sent a cascade of effects through the financial system. It led to a significant strengthening of the Japanese yen this week that started the week at 153.7 yen to the dollar and has now strengthened all the way to 146.4 to the dollar. Significant strengthening in the yen's currency. Just since July 10th, it has strengthened from 161.8 to 146.4. That is having some to speculate about a spike in volatility being caused by the unwind of the yen carry trade, where people have historically gone over to Japan and borrowed cheap yen debt and then converted to other currencies and bought risk assets in other countries with it. Well, now those yen shorts are getting cooked, and it could lead to a sell-off in other assets. Now, what didn't surprise people this week was when Jerome Powell did absolutely nothing, surprising absolutely nobody. The Fed left the target interest rate at 5.25% as expected, leading many to criticize, saying that the Fed has waited too long to act. And now people are virtually unanimous in their belief that the Fed will hike come September. The question is, will they hike by 25 basis points or by 50? Also going on Wednesday, a story that got virtually zero coverage in the financial press. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen released the quarterly refunding announcement, the government's borrowing plans for the next 3 months. And there weren't really any surprises in there, but there was one line that was buried in there where Janet Yellen intends to double the pace of Treasury buybacks from $15 billion a month to $30 billion a month, in which case what Yellen is doing is she is selling more expensive short-term debt at a higher interest rate and using the proceeds from that money to retire longer-term debt at a lower interest rate, which increases the interest expense of the national government, which is how an imbecile would refinance their mortgage. But what it does do is artificially lower borrowing costs on the long end of the yield curve, which directly affects things like mortgage rates and car loans. So what Yellen is doing is spending more debt, spending more government borrowing in order to artificially juice the economy. And well, it just so happens to be an election year, but I'm sure that's just a coincidence and really has nothing to do with the election. Then on Thursday, we got the Institute of Supply Management released their ISM manufacturing PMI, and it was a big surprise to the downside. Anything below 50 represents economic contraction in manufacturing. Anything above 50 represents expansion. And we got an ISM PMI print of 46.8. That's down sharply from the 48.5 last month, which means we're falling in manufacturing activity and we are falling faster. And that's well below the 48.8 that was expected. We saw significant declines in manufacturing employment, significant declines in new orders, and declines in backlogs. And when you've got a decline in new orders and backlogs, that usually means you've got lower employment on the horizon. A little bit of foreshadowing there, hint, hint. Also, prices paid continue to rise, and they rise at an even faster rate. It's a very stagflationary report, guys, where we're seeing higher input prices, yet lower employment. Also going on this week, guys, we got big tech earnings pretty much all week, and they were pretty much not very good. We had Microsoft reported disappointing cloud growth. That led to a sell-off in Microsoft shares. We had Meta reported their earnings, Facebook parent company. That was actually pretty good. They saw some significant ad revenue surges in Meta. Amazon reported a revenue miss and severely light guidance, and that led to a big sell-off in Amazon shares. Apple reported declines in iPhone sales that were offset by increases in things like iPad and Mac. And also, the other important thing is all four companies announced big plans to increase their capital expenditures in artificial intelligence, although none of them have yet to report any significant increase in their revenue or income from artificial intelligence. It has investors starting to wonder when, if ever, are we going to see some payoff in these big AI investments. And then on Friday, we got the big jobs report, and it was a big miss in the non-farm payrolls. 114,000 jobs were added by the U.S. economy in the last month. That's versus expectations of 175,000 added. So we've got a big miss there, not to mention cumulative negative 29,000 jobs in downward revisions to the prior month, something that we see quite often these days. So only a net gain of 85,000 jobs for the U.S. economy. The unemployment rate unexpectedly surged to 4.3% from 4.1% when the market was expecting it to stay flat. And remember, guys, the Federal Reserve said, don't worry, we're going to stick that soft landing, meaning unemployment won't rise beyond 4.5%. Well, we're already getting pretty close there. And I want to send a shout out to MacroEdge, who produced this chart, the line in blue here showing the monthly total of unemployed Americans. And the important thing to notice is historically, once this thing starts to curve upward, it typically accelerates and eventually leads to a big sudden surge in the unemployment rate. And if you look at where we're at right now, this thing has already started to turn upward. It's already starting to accelerate. So it's got a lot of people starting to use the R word. Recession worries are starting to creep into the thinking of the average person. And that led to another week of significant sell-offs in stocks. What we're looking at here, guys, are weekly candles of the S&P 500. And we now have 3 weeks in a row of significant sell-off in the S&P 500. Just to give you a couple of numbers here, we ended the week at 53.46. That's down another 130 points for this week. The 3-week sell-off is now at 269 combined points. Although I would add, guys, we did see a similar sell-off in April that lasted 3 weeks. So it has people wondering, will the dip buyers step in and take stocks back up again? Or will the sell-off continue? I guess we'll have to wait until this week to find out. We saw something similar in the NASDAQ. Again, we got a 3 weeks long sell-off in the NASDAQ here. The NASDAQ sold off this week an astounding 668 points, bringing the 3-week cumulative sell-off to 1,709 points. But once again, we also saw a 3-week sell-off in April before stocks resumed higher, which leaves the big question of where do we go from here? That was me trying to draw a question mark and failing miserably. And I got to talk geopolitics for just a minute, guys. There was some significant developments in the Middle East this week. First of all, Israel launched some sort of attack, we don't know what, that killed the number one leader of Hamas, who was in hiding in Tehran, Iran. And the important thing there is that this attack took place in the capital of Iran. Now, some are saying it was a drone strike, a missile strike. Some were saying a bomb was smuggled into the room where this guy was staying. So we still don't know how the attack took place. But the fact that a Hamas leader was killed on Iranian soil by the Israeli military now has people wondering, what will the Iranians do in retaliation? We also saw Israel killed the number 2 leader of Hezbollah this week in an airstrike in Beirut, Lebanon. Again, this has people worrying about what will be the retaliation from Hezbollah, who is backed by Iran. So you've got the Israelis launching targeted assassinations against military leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah on the same day in 2 different countries. Most people are expecting a retaliation. The Iranians have promised a retaliation. The U.S. has already begun moving additional military assets into the region. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is en route to the Persian Gulf. We have got Ticonderoga-class missile cruisers have been sent to the Middle East, additional Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, and also an additional squadron of ground-based fighters as the U.S. sends more and more assets to the region, and thus concludes This Week in Doom. Back to you, Travis.
Thank you, sir. So we're going to move on to our next segment, and I am honored to bring on to stage Mitch Vexler. Let me just tee you up real quick, Mitch, to the viewers. I've been working with Mitch. I met Mitch about, 6 days ago, Mitch? It feels like it's been 2 years, man. But I met Mitch about 6 days ago. This man has absolutely opened my eyes to the cumulative corruption, the level of fraud. I'm absolutely honored to have you here today. We're going to do an interview pretty much conducted, guys, by Melody, by Jack. Mitch, again, has agreed to be here. He's fighting for the people. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to let it go to you, Melody, if you want to kind of get us started here.
Sure, absolutely. So thank you so much, Mitch. You and I had the opportunity to talk a little bit before we got started here today. And so the first thing that I'd like to do is just set the stage for the community on, what you've been doing and what you've uncovered. And I think first, before we do anything, let's just give them a brief explanation of what happens when essentially the counties, before they send out that notice to you that your property taxes have increased. What happens and who are the players?
The initial notice of value is sent out by all CADs, central appraisal districts, to all property owners, including commercial, single family, multifamily, et cetera. The initial notice of value has requirements where the central appraisal district, the CAD, is responsible for adhering by law to USPAP. USPAP is called the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. The evidence that we have, which is irrefutable, their own documentation, their math, their stats, we simply are exposing it using our mathematical methods and models, clearly shows that USPAP is totally, irrefutably being ignored in favor of fraud being committed.
And this, particularly what we're going to talk about today, is relevant to Texas, although we know that in other states and counties, they might have a similar sort of setup. But just want for the community to understand what we're largely going to be talking about is in Texas today.
Yes. So we have had calls as far away as Canada and Ontario, which is where I'm from. They also use USPAP. We're getting calls from attorneys in Los Angeles, Florida, Kansas, which happened yesterday, Michigan, and throughout Texas. So the problem, as people understand it, the more they begin to understand, then they can look in their own backyard and say, oh, wait a minute here. This problem is the same problem. What they don't understand, because I haven't been able to explain it in detail, but we have a chart, and Travis has seen it, that outlines who the co-conspirators are. The reality of what those co-conspirators are doing, and that one chart, if you simply remove the names of the co-conspirators and you leave their job position, you can pick up that chart and move it into Brazoria County, Johnson County, Harris County. The same story repeats itself, and the denominator which drives this is the median household income. So the median household income, by way of example, in Johnson County is about $87,000. The median household income in Denton County is $109,000. All the fraud is spun in reality off that denominator. So what the CAD will say is, well, your house went up $150,000 this year. There is no math to back up their mouth. Just the opposite. Right. The math doesn't back them up. Ergo, the fraud is irrefutably being committed. They can't get out of that box.
Yeah. And just to kind of quickly, because a lot of us, so Travis and I specifically have a lot of experience in real estate and that space. And so, you know, just kind of what we're saying here, when we're saying they're not following USPAP, is that, you know, that policy is about how to value properties, how to appraise them, right? And so what's happening is these counties, when they're sending you out that notice of value, they are in essence doing an appraisal of your property to calculate your taxes. And what we're finding here is that in reality, they're not following the policy. They're not using math. And what it looks like has happened is they are completely inflating your value, the value of your property. So just kind of wanted to summarize that for the community that, you know, don't think like me and Travis in terms of this just makes perfect sense to us. Travis, did you want to add something real quick or?
No, I was lagging. I apologize. This is the FBI chart right here. Whoops. Sorry about that. I don't know who was searching for Taylor Swift. It wasn't me. Don't come at me. Okay. I'm saying save your money. Don't go to Taylor Swift concerts. Okay. I don't know what that was about, but this is the chart that Mitch has made. And he's essentially saying, remove the names here on this chart, fill them in with the names in your appraisal district, and then just follow the math and, you know, follow the money and do the math, quite frankly. And this is linked in one of the videos. I'll have it linked in this video as well. That's all I wanted to add. I do have the presentation data up though now.
Okay.
So Melody, to your point.
If I could ask a question. Oh, go ahead, Mitch. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. Unless you want me to answer Melody's question, but either way.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. So Melody, to your point, we have testimony from Don Spencer that he, via Rebecca Townsend, took 60,000 properties out of the database, manipulated them, his words. This is testimony under threat of perjury to the board of directors, manipulated them and put them back in the database. That 60,000 property manipulation statement, when we ran the math under what's called an infection rate spreadsheet, proves that the database at Denton Central Appraisal District is at a minimum 76% corrupted just based on that 60,000 manipulated property count. Under no circumstance that we have seen, at least since 2016, because we can't find it, has any CAD in the state of Texas done an appraisal under any definition in law. They have violated USPAP. They violated the Texas Property Tax Code, specifically under 2301E and 2301B. They violated the Texas Constitution, which requires uniform and equal. There's no way out of this box. We have the evidence, and it is a mountain of evidence. Sorry, Jack, your turn.
No, that's all right. Forgive Simple Jack here. Travis and Melody have a real estate background. I don't. So I'm gonna try to grossly oversimplify this just to make sure I'm following the problem right. We are seeing an artificial inflation of home values by county appraisals in Texas. And what is the accusation? They're doing so because they have a financial interest to do so to increase the revenue, the tax revenue for the counties. Is that correct?
It's a lot worse, a lot worse. So watch this for a second. Okay. The median home value as established by Don Spencer and stated again under threat of perjury is $514,000. To have a $514,000 house, okay, that requires an income of $189,000. That's mathematically impossible. And the reason why it's impossible is because the median household income in Denton County is $109,000. Therefore, the median income or the median house value, as stated by Don Spencer, could not be more of a fabrication. It is a straight up lie. They are making the math. Add that to his comment about the 60,000 properties being manipulated in Excel and put back. Again, there's no way out of this box.
So are people getting big notices of big increases in their tax bill because of this? Like, say, a senior couple on a fixed income, all of a sudden the property taxes are doubling out of thin air, even though they haven't changed their lifestyle at all?
I'll answer it this way. Between 2017 and 2023, 1.34 billion in cash was stolen from the property owners in Denton County. And the way they did it is they increased the property values by $67 billion. And it gets a lot worse when you understand that that money that is stolen, that 1.34 billion, is levered 20 to 1 in the bond market. Okay. So what's going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months? You're going to have roughly $32 billion worth of bonds go poof, meaning the bond investors aren't going to get their money back. So watch this for a second. 37% of the households, so that's multifamily households and single family occupied households, cannot afford the roof that's over their head. They're either going to lose their housing or they are going to go bankrupt. And that is based on the 109,000 median household income. The math is the math. Here's the problem. And I think this is where you were headed, Jack. When you understand that that money is levered in the bonds, where is the money going to come from tomorrow morning when you've got 37% of your household population can't afford the roof over their head, that don't have 90 days of liquid assets in case of an emergency? Where's the money going to come from in order to pay any increase in bonds by late this afternoon? And the answer is it isn't. The money is not there. There's no amount of theft that's going to get and change that fact. We're at the tipping point. We're here. This is it. And they can't get out of the box.
And I'm sorry, guys, I'm asking a lot of questions, I know, but I'm trying to, the 20 to 1 leverage, you really piqued my interest. And I remember because I was listening to your interview with Travis on his channel. I listened to it twice while I was cutting my grass last week because I was fascinated by this. The 20 to 1 leverage mechanism, how does that work? Are the counties borrowing against that future cash flow in the 100%. Bond market? Is that?
Absolutely. It's just like a mortgage. It gets a little bit more complex under the hood. So by way of example, and I'm kind of picking on LISD because I actually studied their bonds, but do you know that school districts have bonds for roofs, bonds for parking lots, bonds for sidewalks, bonds for buildings, bonds for land if they want to buy land in advance of building, bonds for stadiums? Well, LISD has a spaghetti bowl of bonds. I couldn't find a single QSIP under the bond scenario for LISD that showed a retirement of any bonds in the last 3 years. So what you're ending up with is a cumulative effect year after year after year. So look at it this way. 4 years ago, they were getting 3.5% money. Right now, today, on those bonds, they're having to pay out 7.9%. Okay? So let's just call it, for the sake of conversation, double up in the cost of interest on those bonds. Well, all of that cost gets passed down as to who's going to get burned. Well, the homeowners are getting burned. All property owners, for that matter, are getting burned by the fraud being committed at the CAD to cover up the debt spent by these taxing entities. Taxing entities include school districts, municipalities, et cetera, et cetera. So the reality of it is that 20 to 1 leverage, just in Denton County alone, is a $32 billion hit that's coming down the pipe. Now, who are the bondholders? Pension funds. Who raises the money for the bonds? Morgan Stanley type entities. Morgan Stanley goes to the pension funds. Here, let's invest in these bonds. Who are the bondholders under the pension funds? Mom and pop. So not only are they going to lose their home, they're going to lose their pensions.
Wow.
We're at the tipping point.
Now you mentioned irrefutable evidence. Have you found any kind of documentation establishing lines of communications with, say, these schools you're mentioning? Hey, we need a new roof on the school. And they go to the appraisers and they say, artificially inflate home prices so we can raise the tax bills. And then I can borrow against the future cash flow from that tax bill and then sell it to a pension fund. And poof, I've got the money for my new roof. I mean, are there lines of communication between these siloed organizations that are not supposed to be conspiring, but have you found any evidence of that?
With testimony from Don Spencer to the board of directors saying that he had lunch to predetermine a budget do the job for you?
Sworn testimony would qualify as documentation, yes. And this individual
You're
you're
welcome.
mentioning, what is his profession?
He is the chief appraiser of Denton Central Appraisal District. But it's even worse. It's even worse than that.
Jack, here you go, buddy. Well, is this okay?
Whoa.
Can I send this to you? Does anyone want to? Anyways,
That's a public record. I mean, so yeah, I mean, there's just no reason you couldn't put that out there.
But this is worse. So there's something called a property valuation study. The property valuation study is run by the state comptroller of the state of Texas. Its sole goal is to transfer cash from one school district to another school district. State comptroller Glenn Hagar has a conversation with the chief appraiser at every appraisal district stating, I need more money. Go raise the values. So not only has the CAD raised values based on fraudulent market values, now the state comptroller steps in on top of it and says, hit it again. I need more money. Put your foot down. I need more money. Well, we have the evidence that communities like Sanger, Pilot Point, Aubrey in Denton County, specifically a subdivision that I built in Copper Canyon, Texas, have been targeted. There's a home in the estates at Copper Canyon that went up 65% in value, no comparisons to justify it, between 2023 and 2024. So the net result of what's going on here is that the government, i.e. Glenn Hagar at the state comptroller's office, has in fact, and is in fact, the final determiner of value, which has absolutely nothing to do with USPAC. The state of Texas has done an end run around its own constitution. It violated the Constitution under uniform and equal. It has violated the Texas Property Tax Code, and Glenn Hagar has done it. And there's simply no way out. They did it.
And again, I mean, this is really, I wish it's the 2020, so nothing surprises me anymore, but I want to be surprised by this. Some strong words there, targeted, right? So a hypothetical scenario, again, hypothetically, I'm in this poor school district. I need to raise money, but you know what? I don't want to be in, I want to get reelected. I don't want to upset my voters. So I can go to somebody outside of my district. I go to the appraiser. I say, go find some rich people in some other town that doesn't vote for me, raise their taxes and send the money to me. They can do that.
Not legally.
But that's what is that what they're doing right now?
What you are looking at here is a full-blown criminal conspiracy to defraud, to the point where I wrote a very detailed letter about 1.5 years ago to my attorney outlining the case for RICO. And this case checks every single box without exception. Wow. This goes to the top. Glenn Hagar is responsible. The state legislature is irrefutably responsible. Senator Betancourt, who makes his living as a real estate tax consultant, keeps sticking Band-Aids on this instead of fixing the problem. He makes a lot of money as a real estate tax consultant. He has zero interest in solving this problem. To all these people, that's just shove it under the carpet and hope it goes away. The issue is, as I said, we're at the tipping point. There is no cash to be obtained. When 37% of your population, your household population, literally has to make a decision, keep the roof over my head or put food on the table. I'm sorry, you, the legislature, you got a huge problem on your hands. You created this mess. There is a fix, but the bottom line is, it's not even useful to talk about the fix until somebody admits that they're a drunk and they're high on cocaine. You've got to get them off the cocaine, and that's where strength in numbers comes in.
And the real takeaway here, I mean, the ultimate source, the people who are being robbed here, is Texas homeowners are having their property taxes raised when they shouldn't be going up, and the pensioners, the retirees who are investing in these bonds probably don't even know they're investing in these bonds. I'm telling you, all roads, they all lead to pensions these days. We've seen this in commercial real estate and private equity and so many different stories. Pensions have become this cesspool of theft and grift. And, you know, I wish I could be surprised by this story, but I'm really not. And now you're saying also the regionality of this, because when I watched your interview on Travis's channel, my big question was, okay, is this a Texas thing? Is this a local thing? Just a few counties, but you're saying other states are reaching out to you?
Absolutely.
Where is that going? I mean, could this case be going national?
I believe at the tail end of the day, we are headed straight to the Supreme Court. We have to go through a series of litigation hurdles, but the fact of the matter is either the state of Texas gets involved and for once shuts this down, because at the tail end of the day, this cannot be fixed. See, your databases are irretrievably corrupted. It's the ultimate definition of garbage in and garbage out. You cannot reverse engineer this problem. It's over. And so on a national level, the reason why you end up at the Supreme Court of the United States of America is under the 11th Amendment to the Constitution, which is called the Supremacy Clause. So the Supremacy Clause says that the Constitution of the United States of America trumps that of the states. The state of Texas, by virtue of what has gone on here, and they fully know that there's a problem, they just choose to ignore it. They shove it under the carpet and keep the illusion going that the economy is good, which it's not. So you end up saying, okay, under the 16th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, do you know that you cannot tax an unrealized gain? What do you think market value is? Market value is an unrealized gain.
Mic drop, Mitch.
Wow.
Mic drop.
You know,
Mic
that's
drop.
you really just nailed that, Mitch. That was profound. That's exactly what they're doing. They're looking at these artificial comps, which again, the guy took the stuff out of the database and fudged the numbers and then put it back in. And then they're using those fudged numbers as comps to raise other people's taxes. And so there's a viral element to how the corrupt data spreads. You're right. This is a tax on unrealized gain. This is just wealth confiscation.
100%.
Oh.
It's completely illegal under the Texas Penal Code. It's illegal under the Texas Constitution. It's illegal under the U.S. Constitution. They don't have a hope and a prayer. Now, their theory is, well, this is just how it's done. And my comment is, okay, fine. So if you were taught to commit murder, does that make it legal? The answer is, of course not. Yeah.
Right.
Travis, do you want to do this viewer question here?
Sure. I'll read it. And just for the viewers, when I went to Mitch, I'm just a simple person. I went to the appraisal district's office and asked for just a simple math. Can you guys just give us a simple math? How are you generating the value? And they couldn't even do it. It's absolutely shocking. There's absolutely no accountability. There's no transparency. It's happening. Who's policing it? There's no one policing it. You have people like Mitch. Thank God you exist, Mitch, that you have the resources to move this forward. What was the question, Jack? Oh yeah. Okay. So this is from my boy Austin in Austin, who actually took us to an abandoned subdivision for new homes, Mitch. So there was about 15 homes that were abandoned. Brand new. He's asking, I'm a bit confused. The counties are the only available government that has the law and the employees to appraise properties hands-on. How can the ultimate liability lie on the state commission? Do you want to take
the ultimate liability lays at the state legislature, because the Texas legislature is fully aware, without any doubt whatsoever. You cannot hide from this. There's been over 80 articles written. So they can't hide and say, well, we're not a party of knowledge. And by the way, that term party of knowledge is based on federal law, person of knowledge. So the legislature set this up. This whole thing is a setup to steal taxpayer money. And it's not a question of where does liability end. The Texas legislature can stop this tomorrow morning. They are the party ultimately responsible. The facts of what the Texas comptroller is doing is an irrefutable fact. We've got the documents. We've got it on tape. So nobody can hide from the facts. All the government is trying to do is shove it under the carpet to keep the illusion going.
And Mitch, there was one more moment in that interview that you did on Travis's channel that I almost crashed the lawnmower when I heard you say it. Tell me about the judge and the football and that story, because that was a whoa moment when I heard that part. The judge's statement.
Well, we ended up with a judge recently who understood that this, in his words, this is a societal issue. The judge actually read the brief. The first judge never read the brief. She didn't want it in her courtroom, so she wanted to punt it. And she did punt it. She just said, I don't want to hear this. This is a political football. I'm out of here. The second judge, who was in her chair, took the time to read it, and he started speaking about Chevron deference. Well, I kind of know something about that, because back in December 23, I actually wrote an amicus brief discussing shutting down Chevron deference, because Chevron deference is about government overreach. I never got a chance to speak to the judge because that was considered ex parte communication. But now that you brought it up, thank you, Your Honor. You are 100% right. We know about it. And that's why I said the odds are that this may very well end up at the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Either the state of Texas gets its act together and shuts this nonsense down, which they have the full authority to do so, or we're going to keep going.
So the first judge just basically ignored the case because forget the legality, forget if they're breaking the law, forget if they're hurting people. I don't want the politics of this in my courtroom. And so she just totally abdicates her responsibility, punts it. And then another judge comes in and actually, thanks for spending the minutes to read it. Actually, he's doing better. And he says, this is a societal issue, as if, I mean, is he kind of suggesting this belongs above my court? I mean,
he did say that straight out. But what he did is he took the time to explain it to my attorney, one of my attorneys, who happens to be an appellate attorney, who was brought on to handle this case. The judge took the time, set it up such that the transcript that the judge outlined is an exhibit on the presentation to the appellate court where my attorney cut his teeth.
Wow.
He understands that judge got it.
So Mitch, I'd like to, so you mentioned this might go all the way to the Supreme Court. Could you take just a moment to kind of walk us through the path of how that might happen? And then ultimately, I also want to talk about how other people can get involved and use your resource as your website as a resource.
The way that it gets there it is convoluted and it's time consuming, and that's part of the problem. Not to mention expense, but this problem can be solved in 24 hours. I mean, that's the reality of it. But because nobody wants to hear it, it gets punted and batted back and forth. Well, we got to go through this court and through this step. In the meantime, they claim immunity, right? And that's part of the problem. So you have this jurisdictional idea. Well, we're the sovereign and we have immunity. No, you don't. You signed an oath. And under that oath, each one of you individual people, members of the board of directors, chief appraiser, deputy chief appraisers, you all signed an oath. The oath says to protect and defend the Constitution of the state of Texas and the United States of America. You broke that oath, and straight up, that's a third-degree felony, aside from the RICO and everything else. So that would take the local prosecutors of all these CADs in those different jurisdictions and different counties to say, that's it, we've had enough, we're going to start prosecuting. The fact that they've broken the laws is irrefutable. We have the evidence. It's going on in every county. We've got data in Johnson County, Brazoria County, Austin. We have it all over the place. We're getting calls from all sorts of people. Now, obviously, our data is based on what's happening in Denton County. But like I said, the denominator is the median income per county. Once you have that number, it unlocks the box. And that's the number that they choose to ignore in favor of committing the fraud. So they cannot get away from what they have done. The problem is if you're going to go down that road of the oath, which is a third-degree felony, then you need a prosecutor, DA, willing to step to the plate and say, that's it, they're guilty, we're going to prosecute. You can shut these CADs down. The more lawsuits that get filed against the individuals under the third-degree felony, fine. You go to the DA and say, do your job. If you don't, you're out of here. The people have the power if they understand what's going on here.
100%. I think that's Mitch, such an important point. Yeah. Go ahead, John.
The important point about the denominator there, right? The incomes, the incomes of the average homeowner in the county is ultimately what supports the cash flow from those bonds and what protects the investments of those pensioners who bought the bonds. So they're artificially inflating the valuations on these bonds. So we can throw securities fraud on top of this also. I mean, the SEC could get involved here and say what you're doing is unlawful. So this is wide reaching.
You're 100% right. I prefer RICO, not that we're going to dance down that road, but you see, why does it so scream of RICO? Because the debt is artificially created. Okay. If I sit you down in a chair and I put a gun to your head and I say, pay your tax, and I get to choose the value of that tax is a creation of a debt. Now, if you don't pay that tax, I'm going to take your house. I'm going to take your retail shopping center. That is RICO.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Yep. All right, Travis, you go, because that was a very clear statement.
So, I mean, I know we're running a little bit low on time. There's just one thing I'm hoping that Mitch could talk about, which is the assumption of these appraisers that basically these appraisers, although they don't agree, perhaps are committing value fraud, and how there's an assumption that even though they're committing value fraud, there's that implied immunity, in essence, that they can get away with the errors that they're making. And I'm hoping you could explain, Mitch, how that's actually false. There is no implied immunity because of the fraud, and as a result, there's also no insurance protection from lawsuit, which equals it has to crash and burn. But can you go over implied immunity?
There is no such thing as implied immunity. Now, you will see clauses having to do with immunity, but that's based on British law. And frankly, it's just complete nonsense, because if there was such a thing as implied immunity, then why did you sign an oath? Is the oath itself a fraud on the public? Is the 5th and 14th Amendment under due process of the U.S. Constitution a fraud on the public? Why do those exist if immunity exists? In other words, when somebody says we have implied immunity, they are lying to you. And in fact, if you go and look at the definition of implied immunity, it's based on discretion. So let's be real clear about something. There is no discretion not to use use path. There is no discretion not to adhere to the Texas Constitution under uniform and equal. There is no discretion not to adhere to the Texas Property Tax Code, specifically 2301B and 2301E. They do not have discretion. This is required under law. So anybody that says, yeah, we have implied immunity, you can't touch us. Well, yeah, we can, and we will.
Excellent. Mitch, I cannot thank you enough for all the time that you have given this community over the last 6 days, and what you're bringing here is so important. And we truly hope that we can help spread your message. And the idea is what we're trying to do on DNN and on all of our channels is to build a community that can come together and make changes and, stand up to the fraud and corruption and the bezel that we see out there. So could you maybe end this by telling us how our community can help you, especially if they're in Texas?
Frankly, anybody whose community, county touches uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, on that page there at mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD, in the middle of the page, you'll see a petition. And all we're asking for people to do, and we will not share this information, it's strictly for the benefit of the judges, to see that these are real people that have this problem. So anybody can sign it. And it takes 10 seconds to sign up. And eventually it'll end up in front of a judge. Say, Your Honor, look at this. Look at all these people. Slam down a ream of paper. Okay. What are you going to do? Deny us access to your court again, Your Honor? Go ahead. We'll make a motion to have you bounced out of the court. Because the truth of the matter is, what you've got to realize, the court belongs to the citizens of that county, not the judges. The idea that judge punted, I had a bit of a problem with that.
Yes.
Fully entitled to go to court. The purpose of a court is to stop chaos.
Right. So, Mitch, we were going to wrap, but I just think this is so important, and it follows. So, we did a story here on DNN about the Chevron deference and how this could be a monumental sea change if our, judiciary can step up to the plate. And a lot of people are like, well, they'll never do that. But you just said the most important thing that everybody can realize is we can make them do that. We may not have all the resources in the world to file lawsuits, but we can find people like you, or we can come together to make this happen. And so when everybody thinks we don't have agency, we absolutely do. And we hope through this community, we can, bring up people like you so that others who want to do something and want to help can do so. So guys, this is really important stuff. And it's really important to understand that we are able to affect change.
I just want to say one thing about your point of agency. Understand something here. The law has been irrefutably broken. It's been completely ignored. Under the Fifth and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution, all citizens are entitled to due process. The punt to the court is real simple. Either the law exists or it doesn't. If the law does not exist, then why exactly are we paying real estate taxes? Make up your mind. Either the law exists or it doesn't. I'm okay either way, just tell me. And so is every other tax-paying citizen. If they don't have due process, there simply is no reason to be paying real estate taxes and putting yourself up to subjective extortion.
100%. Amazing.
The libertarian in me right now is so fired up. I feel like I'm at a Metallica concert, like I'm going to start crashing into things right now. Thank you so much, Mitch. I think what you're doing is such a massive public service, not just to the people in your community or in Texas, but everyone in the United States. And the fact that these other regionals are now reaching out to you saying, hey, we've got the same thing here. I look forward to hearing about the Supreme Court striking this down. And I don't know what would come out of it, but that judge is right. This is a political football. This will make a mess. But that is not an excuse to ignore what is happening. She wears those robes and she sits on that bench for a reason. The public has entrusted him to adjudicate things like this. So I really look forward to hearing more about this. Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mitch.
All right, Mitch, before you go, brother, someone was like, what's Mitch's background? Wizardry. Okay. It's wizardry. He's an absolute genius, mathematician, builder extraordinaire. I could tell you, Austin, that my 24 hours with him personally, he was going over 82 files. I mean, people are reaching out to this man it's just mind blowing, and what's mind blowing is the people that are reaching out to him are filthy rich. No disrespect to them or what you're doing, but they're filthy rich, but they're spending their money and they're asking him questions that a child can answer. And that blows me away that the reckless spending habits, it goes all the way up the chain. It's actually in some situations gets worse because at least the people that are broke don't have the money to spend. These people have money to spend and waste. And it's just really blows me away. Mitch, you want to, anything that we didn't cover that you want to kind of end on? I know we're a little bit over time here, but anything?
No, my background is different. So I'm a 37-year builder developer with a background in statistical probability and quantitative finance. So given a huge nature of where I come from and how I got here, it allows me to see things and talk to people that most people can't do. I've had thousands of tenants. I've built over 1.5 million square feet of retail, thousands of multifamily tenants. We built thousands of single family lots. So I'm in a different position than most people. But when I learned that 37% of the households, this was back in October after that statement of the 60,000 properties, when we figured out the math, that 37% were going to lose their homes and or go bankrupt, I went down, I took Leslie with me, and we went down and we saw Matt Nowak, my attorney. We laid the case out and we said, Matt, devil be damned. We don't have any choice but to pull the trigger and file the constitutional suit. These people are in harm's way. Everybody is being extorted. They don't know it. They don't understand it. But that's what the legislature is depending on. They're depending on people's ignorance. What we're trying to do here is flip the lights on.
And that's all it takes sometimes, right? Just shining the light. And, to what we were talking in our interview, Mitch, you talked about the storm that people are in when, they've got all these bills coming at them. They get that bill from the county. They get an escrow notice that says their mortgage payment is going to double. They can't put food on their table. They can't eat. It's very hard to know what to do in that situation, especially when you don't understand you're part of a bigger system. And so, again, I just want to thank you for shining the light on this incredibly corrupt system so that we can give the tools to people to go in and, dispute these taxes. And if enough of us do it, then we can truly make a difference. So I just want to thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored.
All right, Mitch, we will see you later, brother.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll be talking to you
Mitch.
soon.
Bye. Bye.
Oh,
Travis,
right, guys.
what a great find. Wow.
Yeah,
Let me just say,
amazing.
incredible stuff.
well,
That-
I mean,
that
I'll
was-
tell.
Bravo, sir.
Oh, well, I mean, I'll tell you guys, how this happened. It wasn't even me. It was the community. It was a community on YouTube, which obviously we've been trying to blow the whistle on how I was just looking at how a normal, easy appraisal that's done from a mass, someone that's paid to appraise and all of the fraud there. And, I asked the community to send appraisals so that we can review. I did a video that almost nobody watched. It was really sad for me because it put so much time and effort. But one of the people that did watch that, and that was made from the viewers, from all of the information they gave me, Mitch was one of those people. So it's really a tale of YouTube, and it's a tale of people coming together. I just so happen to be at the right place at the right time, right? So we're going to move on to the next story, guys. This one's going to be, and this is my opinion, we're going to go over live and active data, but why I think there's going to be that the housing market collapse is imminent. There's no way around it. The math just doesn't work. And I want to share with you guys why I think that with up-to-date information. So whether or not you agree with me, that's fine. But we want to look at leading indicators. And I want to talk about first, if I may, let me see here. Let's add this to the stage. I want to talk about forced selling. Forced selling is a really big bullish kind of pushback on why people think that values will sustain regardless of income growth. So I wanted to talk about forced selling outside of death, medical, divorce that we have. We always have that type of forced selling. And I also want to talk about it outside of new construction. So all of the data that I'm going to present today is not including the absolute catastrophe that's happening in the new construction world. But right now, you guys, again, forced selling, where does the forced selling happen? Unemployment. What's happening with unemployment? Well, unemployment right now is escalating out of control. In fact, not only is the unemployment escalating out of control, and they'll revise that data to show it's actually worse. And actually, Mitch has data that's suggesting the unemployment rate is actually 10. But Jack, can you pronounce this? Or you're glitchy over there, Jack. You're a little glitchy. Melody, is this SOM rule? How do you pronounce this?
What?
How do you pronounce the SOM? This was triggered. This is really important.
The SOM rule,
right? Yeah, the
Yeah.
SOM. It's this. I mean, my God, I'm with the slow reading group. I thought you had my back there. I told you hooked on phonics didn't work for me. But anyways, guys, the SOM rule was triggered recently. We had a massive spike in unemployment. So don't just look at the 4.3%. Understand exactly what we're saying, the trajectory. This is what's happening behind the scenes. This was triggered. Anytime this has been triggered, we've had 100% recession. This is an indicator, 100% recession. But what I'm trying to explain, guys, is this is going to escalate. We're only at 4.3 right now, but I wanted to show you guys only looking at when did unemployment really start going up. A lot of people, Melody included, I think, are backdating the recession till October of 2023. And if you look going into November, I mean, you can clearly see unemployment's going up. It's a really big deal understanding what we're saying as far as unemployment. These things obviously are taking time. Now, so forced selling's coming. It's already here.
Can I give a shout out real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I'd say, so anybody curious in employment, what's going on there? I want to give you two people to follow. One is actually in our community right now, and that's at KennyCap PhD on X Twitter. And we'll put that his link in the show notes or comments. And then the other is Anna Wong. She's the chief economist at Bloomberg, who I was lucky enough to have dinner with on Wednesday night. And she is a rock star and one of the only economists that was out there calling for 4.5% unemployment by the end of the year. So we'll put those links. But, guys, we know you don't have a lot of time, but so we want to give you resources that you can use when you want to really dive into things like employment. Sorry, Trav, go ahead.
No, one
take
more
it
recommendation
away.
out there, Mel. One more
Okay.
recommendation. Same thing on the unemployment macro edge on X
Oh,
on
yes.
Twitter. Macro Edge actually predicted that 4.3% print that we just got yesterday.
Correct.
The whole economic community, all the analysts out there were saying it's going to stay at 4.1. Macro Edge bullseye at 4.3. Good job, guys. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and say that that's all going to be revised upward eventually. So hopefully give me props later, Jack and Melody, because I'm very jealous, of course. But anyways, I mean, this is recent data, right? This happened August 2nd. It's August 3rd. This happened yesterday. I mean, this is a shocker to a lot of people. I don't think us, but this just happened. There is no way around these recession indicators, guys. I mean, you're seeing the mainstream media, you're saying the doomers, da-da-da-da. There's no way around this for the bulls anymore. And not only that, we are so crazy close to reinversion. This is another massive, well-trusted indicator of a recession. Again, why is recession important? Unemployment, value drop, value collapse. This all pertains to the housing market, but the end inversion is very, very close. Now, it's well understood and well talked about that when this reinverts, things get really bad. I've been suggesting that things are already bad and we don't have to have reversion in order to go into recession. So prepare now. And then another thing I want to tell you guys is, I think there is going to be a massive value drop in houses. It doesn't make me necessarily, I'm explaining why. I think we're going to have a massive drop. Not only the fraud that Mitch is uncovering, but income over price. You see income over price. We could kind of see that with Case-Shiller and CPI. And you see the double bubble. I've been arguing the double bubble for so long. And because there's this double bubble, there's going to be I don't see any other way to not have a massive value collapse. We're not making enough money as citizen consumers to sustain this. And so, and then add the fraud on top of there.
Trav, can we stop here for just a sec? Because I just think that what Mitch said, and then on top of what you've been saying about this, and I've been saying is, why do we need to say anything else except that the household median income does not support median prices. And he made that as a very clear statement in terms of the denominator. So I don't care, it's as if we think that the top 20% are somehow very extra special and can come out and save this housing market, when in reality, if they did do that, they themselves would find themselves bankrupt because they would not be able to sustain the cost of these homes. So why is it we have to say anything else? Clearly we do, because there's so much narrative out there. But I just wanted to take a moment to pause right there.
I'll tell you, fraud and corruption. It's because, if it's the fraud and corruption, is more powerful than quantitative tightening. I'm going to say
government intervention. Yeah.
The government intervention just escalates and accelerates the fraud. And I'm just saying back, like, we wouldn't have as much fraud if there was more accountability with enforcement. Right? It's, because when the fraud starts happening and you're a professional in the industry, right? You're a realtor, you see other people committing fraud. Maybe you don't understand what fraud is, but if everyone is doing it, even as a rookie in the industry, you come into an environment now where fraud is normal. Overvaluation is normal. Being a cheerleader is normal. What's abnormal is saying, stop, wait. And I'm just going to say right now, just in case anyone can't watch this, as far as anyone's wondering what my advice is for a potential home buyer right now, it's stop. Right now, it stops. Don't buy right now. We're experiencing, like I've been trying to explain, prices going down at the same time as interest rates, at the same time that inventory is exploding. I call that a trifecta. That's a trifecta for us who have been patient. So anyways, let me make anything else you want to add there, Melody or Jack? Okay, I'm going to move on to leading indicators. Now, here's a narrative that I've been following because I like to listen to the bulls. The bulls sharpen me, guys. They sharpen us. I mean, the really good bulls like, Logan, even Lance, I would consider bullish because of the income thing. It's like, if you're going to ignore the income and the fraud thing, like, you got to kick rocks. I'm sorry. I love your graphs, but you got to kick rocks. You're not explaining that there's a, there's a leak in the roof. We're repairing drywall down here, but there's still the roof that's leaking, causing the damage. And so here's a point I want to say. Interest rates. Okay. There's been this whole narrative, guys, where everyone's going to rush back into the industry, right? Or rush back into purchasing. There's all of these buyers on the sideline. You've heard it. There's buyers on the sideline. If you don't buy right now, there's going to be a rush. So you got to buy right now. But when we look at the data, we see otherwise. We see that demand is still in the gutter, despite what you see on your computer screen. When we compare the year-over-year change in interest rates are now lower, guys. So we have the data. Interest rates are now lower year over year. This time last year, we were at 7.04%. Right now, we're at 6.78%. That equals 26 basis points lower. So we have 26 basis points lower, which means what? Demand should increase because interest rates are lower and purchasing power is apparently greater. But when we look past the narrative and we look at data, we can see mortgage applications are actually down. Despite the interest rates being down, they're down 14%. So again, we're comparing year over year. So the data is year over year. You can't, and this is tainted data. This is fraudulent data to begin with, but we're using fraud data to even show that it's still not working. The math is still not adding up. The narrative has been fraud and a lie the whole time. Or it's been people that have been lazy, trying to push a subscription or a commute or whatever it is. Demand is down despite the interest rates. You also see that right here with interest. And this is what scares me, because the less that people are interested in learning about the housing market, the more likely it is for them to make a rush decision in purchasing. And the sad fact of the matter is American consumer citizens are underprepared to handle the housing market. A lot of people are going to put their guard down because of this commission lawsuit. But the commission lawsuit only makes the problem worse. It's a fake sense of legitimacy. It's a false sense of legitimacy, because now they're requiring by law buyers sign a buyer's rep. If you guys don't think commission is on MLS, it is on MLS. It's just done differently. I did a post earlier today, but regardless, let's look at leading indicators. Okay, let's just move on to the next thing, leading indicators that I've been talking about. I want to show you guys without a shadow of doubt. Last video we did, I said, remember July 14th, because July 14th is when we were notified that we hit the peak. July 14th is when we are notified, and we notified you guys, that houses were going down on a national level. Vital Signs, X, Twitter. Join the community, man. I miss you. I know you're out there bashing the bears, but I still love you. You're still a consumer. I know you're confused. Come back to real estate mindset. But you got to stop saying that prices are still going up on a nationwide level, because they're not. And by doing so, you're pushing a narrative that is built on lies. Because here's the data. As of July 14th, home prices have been going down for 3 weeks straight. They've gone down by about $4,000. Okay, this is just 2024. But let me now, again, that is kind of a leading indicator, right, guys? You know, that's a leading indicator. And I also want to make a point. Back in 2022, remember, they revised the data downward. In 2022, okay, you see this black line? This black line was above this, I don't know what that is, gold, false gold, false hope. I don't know what that is. Wrecked dreams over affordable houses. I don't know what color that is right there. But remember, you guys, the black line was over this line. They've revised this downward to push a brand new narrative. It's proprietary the way they're coming up with this info. This is not true median. This is proprietary. But nevertheless, I wanted to remind you guys that in 2022, don't worry, we actually were above where we're at right now. And so the leading indicators, okay, let's start with, what do we want to start with, guys? As far as leading, and by the way, again, we're down $4,000 roughly in 3 weeks. So $4,000 in 3 weeks. Let's look at active listings. And what I'm going to do is I'm trying to eliminate the noise. So we're only looking at 2022 versus 2024. And to remind the viewers, the reason I'm doing that is because the second half of 2022, we experienced we broke seasonality and we had prices deflate. Deflation is important. We're not talking seasonality. Okay, so deflation. So that's why I have the black line up, which is 2022. So we're comparing leading indicators to 2022. And again, looking at the active inventory. And by the way, you guys, one of the things I got right, Johnny Fly, if you're here, confirm this. Trey, you know, I did a video with Jason Walter in December of 2023. And I said, we're going to hit, according to Redfin, active listings of 1 million. We hit it. I was right. Thank God. And also I was right about how the interest rates stay elevated for the first half of this year. Thank God. We actually needed that as America. But we hit 1 million active listings. This is Redfin's data. And what I want to point out is, you know, basically we're ahead of the peak compared to 2021. We hit a peak in 2021 around August 21st. In other words, you guys, we're 2 months ahead of schedule. If we're looking at deflation, and remember the higher end of the median is tainting nationwide media, and that's okay. We'll use the data. We'll let them manipulate it. So be it. We know they're going to revise it, whatever. I'm just explaining to you we're ahead of schedule. I'm just explaining to you, I'm trying to explain these leading indicators. We have leading indicators now. There's no way out. There's no way around this. We have active inventory and it is going up. Okay, but that's just comparing active inventory. Now, the other leading indicator, price cuts. I love talking about price cuts. Price cuts, the same thing, you guys. We peaked. Where did we peak? Let's see. In 2022 in October, look at it. So October, we peaked at 6.7% price cuts. This is looking at week over week, essentially, a rolling weekly. But regardless, we hit 6.7% price cuts. That was the peak in 2022, the end of October. We had already exceeded that July 28th at 6.8%. And again, what I'm trying to explain to the viewers, it's happening fast. You're not going to see it in mainstream headlines, but we are 3 months ahead of schedule from a price cut standpoint. In fact, we've actually broken records. We've broken records. I don't know what else to do, except let's talk about median days on the market, because I don't even know what to say here. I mean, this is taking on a life of its own, right? I can't even compare anything. I can't, because the days on market right now, houses are sitting and rotting, and we're going into the seasonality now. If you guys want to talk about seasonality, where naturally homes sit on the market longer, but again, we're already ahead of schedule, and we're ahead of schedule by about 4 months. So what does all this equal? What am I trying to say here? This is what I'm trying to say, okay? And I'm going to open it up. I'm sorry if I was rambling. Don't buy. Overall, just don't buy. I'm just going to come out and say, do not buy a house right now. Please stay patient. We have leading indicators that is showing us what's going to happen. Taking my opinion out of it, if you really want to know if there's going to be a price crash, you got to look to February of 2025, because that's normally when seasonality comes back. So I want to disclose that, but I mean, with these leading indicators and what we see right now, we see prices going down, we see interest rates going down, and we see inventory going up. But understand, we went over macro data. If you really want to know what's going on in your housing market and use these leading indicators, you got to go subdivision to subdivision. That is just the way you have to do it. But right now, you guys, if you're patient, if you're waiting, if you're looking at the math, we have a trifecta happening. If you love the ponies, if you bet on horses, I don't know, I have a couple times as a kid, I get a hot dog, bet $10 on the ponies, and your boy hit trifectas. So I'm trying to bring that luck of my youth here and let you guys know the trifecta is happening in real estate. We will have a value collapse. I think that's obvious now. And that's it. That's all I had. What do you guys think?
Okay. So Trav, just a question. I caught your interview with Lance. I thought you did an excellent job. I think one narrative we're hearing out there right now, which I think that we could probably dispute, people are really focusing on, hey, new listings are really slowing down. Well, we know that that's seasonal, right? That those new listings, but what's important is not necessarily how many new listings we're adding in the off season. It's how that's building and not being sold. But, you know, I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of speak to that, because I felt like that was, go ahead.
Well played, Miss. I did want to speak on that actually, because when I thought about that comment after the fact, I started to realize actually it was a bad point. His point was, we would see the forced selling from an affordability distress standpoint in the new listing data. But what he failed to explain is that we don't know why the new listings exist to begin with. Those new listings, it's not necessarily for people from the golden handcuff effect. I actually think that new listings being low supports the fact that when rates go down, we will have a flood of sellers. And I think that because the new listing data is not high enough to say people are getting off the sidelines to sell the house. So if those new listings, Melody, are actually people that have late payments on the mortgage, then it does support what we're saying. And I think the error is again, we don't know why they're selling. But based on the surveys, they're selling because they can't afford their homes. Right. Based on the survey, there's late payments. So again,
we don't have that data, right? We can't tell you why are they listing right now. You know, the MLSs are they keep all that data locked in, even if in some they're not even capturing it. So right now we can only look at the numbers themselves, but we can dive into local markets And especially when you look down in Florida, in Texas, you can see them talk about this was a short-term rental. You can see it in the description. It's just very hard to get it in aggregate. And that's why I think we have to always validate our assumptions. And I also felt that the point about what are these new listings? Are they because of distress? Because behind mortgage payments, I oversee mortgage books, and I can tell you these people have listed their homes. They can't sell them. And if they could even sell them, they have
Right.
nowhere to go. And they also know that with these programs that it's better to sit and stay. So go ahead, Trav. Sorry.
I mean, that's the other thing. Like, we're just looking at new listings. It's not even talking about the existing listings that we have in the days on market exploding. What if the current listings with the days on market exploding are the distressed sellers?
Correct.
That's the point. So a lot
Right.
of the active listings could be
Right.
a type of forced selling already.
Right.
And that's the data we don't have.
Exactly. 100%.
I mean, I guess we don't have it. I mean, if I look at the health of the consumer, I mean, we have it all day, but it's
I think we can triangulate it. And I think that's important, because we had a comment in the chat from G1 about, how can we trust the data? We can't.
Yeah.
But what we can do is triangulate. And what do we mean by that? We get enough data points that it can give us a story around the data. And that's what we really, all of us, try to do, is look at this from a kind of 360 perspective.
I mean, it's an issue because it's easy to create a false narrative, because there is a huge gap of ownership post quantitative tightening versus pre-quantitative tightening. So that's a reality, but that doesn't mean what we're saying is not happening right now. And what I'm saying is a lot of people, and this is the emotionally difficult thing for so many consumers on the sideline, they saw their friends and family or whoever maybe make a foolish purchasing decision, join the bidding wars. They fear of missing out. Maybe they bought real estate online. It was horrible, actually, but those same people got a 3% interest rate, 4% interest rate. And now their homes are worth $150,000 more. But what I'm suggesting is this, and like Mitch points out, that's all fraud. Right. And y'all fell for it. And think about this, we have 164 million houses. How many sold? 10 million. So 10 million houses sold, and now 164 million houses are wrecked. Just doesn't add up, guys. It's simple math here.
All right, Jack.
I have one question, and this is for either one of you. Travis, could we share my screen for a moment here, brother?
Yeah.
All right, 10-year yield. Look at what it did this week. I mean, wow. All right, we're down 50 basis points in the last, I think, 7 trading days. So my question to both of you guys, Travis is a former loan officer, Melody with your mortgage finance background. I would expect that we're going to see a pretty sizable drop in the average mortgage rates in the coming weeks. However, there's an asterisk here, because we just got a surge of unemployment. And I think anybody who's paying attention that isn't a political quack is probably realize unemployment is about to accelerate to the upside. So in the eyes of the banks, what does that mean for the affordability of the average home buyer over the coming weeks? If we got long-term interest rates are falling, but at the same time, the risk of loaning to people long time is rising because of rising unemployment. So, I mean, either one of you guys take a crack at this. What do you think this means for mortgage rates and affordability?
Melody, what do you think?
Well, yeah, so it's complicated. We're definitely going to see rates come down. But to your point, Jack, it's not going to stimulate the kind of activity that most probably think is going to happen, because in my opinion, affordability is more impacted by that home price, as well as that purchasing power, which is being eroded by all of that increased debt service. And so this is very similar to what happened during the last crisis. Rates came down significantly, and there was a mini refi boom, but it did nothing to save the mortgage market, and definitely not enough to save the economy. So we will see increased activity. We will also see a whole bunch of narrative around this. It was the same in December. This happened in December. And I want to mention, I'll mention it in my story next, that there might be a form of yield curve control that's happening there. You mentioned that at the beginning, Jack, and that is the reason we're seeing these rates go down. But it's going to be a big narrative push to the election. But the reality is, we can see it. The consumer is dead. And so I don't believe this move in rates is going to change the direction of this ship. It will have a short-term impact, but it's not going to be enough to save it.
I mean, we have the data, Jack. I just presented it. It's right here. We have year over year. We can track this data. We have lower interest rates by 26 basis points, allowing 2.6% higher purchasing power. So rates are lower. Okay, we have
So
data.
that's
Rates are lower,
right
and
there.
yet demand is still down 14%. I mean, I think the reality is if rates go down, it may spur a little bit of buying here and there, but the real problem is the foundation of the house
Or
market. like I just showed you.
refinance. Yeah.
You know, it's the price. It's the price not keeping up with income. I mean,
So
it's
yeah,
simple
and
math.
it's going to give hope, right, Jack? They'll be able to refinance, or they think they'll be able to refinance. The problem is a lot of them are not going to qualify, but it'll give them hope right up until October. No, I mean, right. It's just enough. But I don't think in reality, a lot of people that need this refinance are going to be able to qualify for it.
I mean, refinance is
and
garbage.
the amalgamation, guys, both answers there. You can kind of see what Melody is describing with the slightly tighter lending standards, right? 10-year treasury drops 50 basis points, but 30-year mortgage only comes down 26. So
Right.
we're seeing the spread between long-term debt and mortgage debt is actually growing. Maybe both are falling, but the banks are tightening their standards as those rates fall.
Right.
Yeah,
And-
QT. They're not buying mortgage-backed securities.
Right. I was going to say that. So, what really moves that spread is if the appetite for mortgage-backed securities, and with that credit contraction, and with and if we don't have an unlawful actor like we did previously with the Fed coming in to buy it, that I think you're not going to see that spread get smaller. And so we may see the 10-year come down significantly, but mortgage rates won't come down as far. That's a possibility.
Yes, we have that data as well. We actually have data, you guys, where I think it was 2012 to 2016, the federal funds rate was 0. We don't have to even guess, Melody. Like, we know mortgage-backed securities.
We don't know exactly how all this plays out from here. That's all I'm saying, because we're about to talk about Japan. And I think that we have to, I think that
I'll put you in the hot seat.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're in the hot seat. Whenever you're ready for your screen too. I don't have your screen.
Okay.
All
right.
Girl. I got out the way.
So I'm gonna kind of slow this story down a bit. My typical tendency is to go too fast. But you should be able to see my screen. So if you guys remember, we talked about the Japanese yen. We talked about the intervention on a previous show, and this is really our mission, is to kind of give you an introduction to stories that we think are going to be meaningful from this point forward, and then give you the follow-up to that story. And so here, I just want to talk about what happened in the markets, because, what you're going to hear is a ton of narrative around, it's the unemployment that spooked people. But in reality, these markets are a very giant casino, and they have so many different games. So you may know how to play roulette, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be successful at playing 21 or blackjack. So it is almost impossible to know how to play all of these games. And so it's really important to look at the different games and how they might impact the markets. And if you think, I think the problem is we all thought we were super smart and we could make calls like this. But I want to focus really quickly on this article from ING Think. And this is about unpeeling the carry trade, because what I want to show you here is that there's potentially a lot more pain coming. So this is really important to understand. If you think you're a market guru, you need to understand these risks out here. And also, because we know, we've talked about in this show, Japan is the largest. I think you might have said, Jack, they're the largest holder, but they weren't the largest buyer in the bond markets. So, but they hold a huge amount, and if they sell whatever their activity, that could have impacts on that 10-year treasury rate as well. So all of this is interrelated and very complicated. But quickly, so we know that people have been taking advantage of this, of being able to borrow cheaply in yen, and they're also putting on these short positions, betting on the fact that the yen is going to go down. What Jack talked about is, and I've talked about, is then the Japan Bank of Japan came in. So, well, two things. One, we know they intervened in the currency markets. And then secondly, they went to raise rates, which was, contra to what a lot of people are doing right now with these challenging sort of economic times. So, essentially, what we have going on is you've got people in the market with this short trade on the yen, and they are unwinding those positions. And what ING is saying is they think that about this position has dropped from like it was at a 48% readings around the start of July, and it's now dropped. But the problem is they're still short, and they're still short at a level of the yen that is much weaker than what we're seeing now. So if the Bank of Japan is committed to this path, there's going to be trouble. Now, will they be committed? I am not an expert on Japan. We just saw their stock market crash as well. You never know what's going to happen under duress. But I want to show this chart because I think it's really important. If you look at, so you go back to 20, and this just gives you a picture of how we never really understand it's hard to know everything that's going on in the market. But this will give you a picture of the speculative shorts in the yen future contracts. You can see up, until about, the middle of 21, there really wasn't a ton of interest, some at the beginning of 2020. But when things went sideways, people kind of got out of this trade. But then essentially this really kind of ticked up here with some peaks and valleys. But what you're seeing now is that positioning is starting to exit. And so this has become, and to be clear, what they're doing, borrowing, cheap in yen and then buying tech stocks and things like that. If they're exiting those positions, that means sell off in tech as well. So you have these kind of levers at the same time that you're getting questions around AI. So point here is it's just a very complicated story. So what's really concerning, in my opinion, so that's just the shorts, the speculation, but there has also been a huge increase in cross-border borrowing in yen, something around 742 billion. So this comes from the Bank of International Settlements. What they are is they're kind of like, you think about the Fed does the beige books or they do the Kansas deep dive. The Bank of International Settlements does that for all of the central banks across the world. And so they are saying that they have seen this increase in borrowing, in cross-border yen borrowing, which, they're also saying at the same time, because of these huge moves in currency, what they don't know is how much of that borrowing has been hedged for interest rate moves. So let me, I know not everybody knows what the word hedge means. What does that mean actually? So when you take out these borrowings, you have to put some sort of other position on the other side to protect you from any interest rate move. And so what the Bank of International Settlements is saying is we don't think that a lot of this borrowing that's happened is being protected properly against loss. And so we used it back in my day at GMAC. We would use interest rate swaps to hedge our origination pipelines. And whenever something happened in the currency markets, that could completely blow us up if we weren't properly hedged. And the problem is when you are hemorrhaging cash, it is very difficult to buy the hedges that you need. So this is very concerning as well. And then I'll kind of in here because we're running a little behind. The biggest observation I want to say here is that I'll just read it. Previous historical rounds of sharp Japan yen deleveraging were attributable to the 1997 to 98 Asian financial crisis and the 2008 global financial crisis. And for those of you that may not have been around for that 97 to 98 Asian financial crisis, it was a doozy, and it just took a whole bunch of countries out. So this is, you wonder, you're like, what are these Japanese, they're over there, they've got a crazy demographics, they've been stagnant in their economy. What do they have to do with what's going on over here? They have a lot to do with what's happening in our markets. And so it's so important to pay attention to this story. So guys, I'll stop there and we can go for questions.
Melody, that first text slide you put up there had a very interesting point. I think you highlighted it. The average entry point for the yen shorts, which anybody who's doing the yen carry trade is short the yen because they've borrowed it, right? So the average entry point was 152.5. We're sitting here after this week at 146.5. So
That's
the
right.
average yen carry trader has already lost 4% just on what the yen did this week. All right. Now factor in the point that you've got the BOJ is raising rates and the Fed is lowering rates. So the arbitrage between the two interest rates is shrinking. And already the strengthening of the yen has eaten alive all of their gains for the first year. So this is very real. This is absolutely happening. And I also want to add a couple other dimensions to this onion, a few more layers. Right now going on simultaneously, we have 3 of the most crowded trades in history all happening at the same time. We've got the AI mania, we've got the yen carry trade, and we've got short volatility, people picking up pennies in front of the steamroller. Now, here's the thing. All 3 of these trades are essentially the same thing. And a breakdown of one causes a breakdown of the other 2. And then when the breakdown of one causes the breakdown in the other 2, well, then the other 2 start forcing the breakdown of the first one again, and it turns into a feedback loop. All these people selling 0 DTE puts against their big tech stocks, right? A spike in the VIX can cause those puts to go underwater very quickly. And those puts going down in value can cause a spike in the VIX. And a spike in the VIX causes people to unwind the carry trade. And then the unwinding of the carry trade causes a further decline in the price of the AI stocks. Rinse, repeat. So these 3 trades that everybody in the world thinks they're so freaking smart because they've all piled into the same thing at the same time, all 3 of them will unwind together in a vicious feedback loop. Now, we got a little preview of some of that this week. I don't know if this is the big one or not. We saw it in April and it stopped and it resumed higher. I think NVIDIA earnings are going to play a big role in that. But the important thing, these 3 very crowded trades, they're all essentially the same freaking thing. And I don't even think people realize that. And it is absolutely a systemic risk to assets across the board. Very good job, Melody. Thank you.
Trav.
I mean, Melody, I'm just save your freaking money, guys. Just save your money. We can look at all the math in the world. It's all pointing to the same thing. I mean, it makes me feel a little bit more helpless, Melody, because it's just like another reminder that we're being manipulated on the world stage, that it goes beyond our politicians and our counties. And it is a little bit discouraging, but it's also eye-opening that like, it's kind of because of how globalized stuff is. It makes sense that we're having all this weird numbers and then like the lockdown and like, why is this so hard to read? But make no mistake, I mean, there's a world collapse going on and it's going on right now. And the simple math suggests it. It's difficult for some people to see it. And again, I think it's because of how they're manipulating it, the money printing, the wars being fought. Don't forget, every war that's fought, there's a mind-blowing amount of money injection that's created somewhere in the world. So it is a lot of intertwining, and I hate it, Melody. That's all I have to say.
I mean, I think this is the point of our channels and our platforms, right, Travis, is that you can't understand the stock market by one stock price. You can't understand the housing market by home prices alone. I mean, there are macro themes. There are so many forces in the markets that are moving things that, that can act as different levers depending on how they're pulled. But I think what we're trying to tell you is that it's way more complicated than you think. And you've got to have your eyes open. And to what Jack said about there's very 3 similar trades, this has the potential to just explode in a spectacular way. And guys, there's more leverage in the system. Some say 2 to 3 times more than the GFC. And that's the other thing that's important here. I think that in many ways, armchair warriors tried to convince us, tried to gaslight us by, arguing all the time. How can you be so dramatic? It's not going to be as bad as 2008. When in reality, this has a setup and potential to be, 3 times worse.
I love the armchair warrior comment. I've never heard that before. I love it. I'm going to steal it. I'm going to use it. Look at this comment on the screen. This goes into what we're saying. This is actually really funny, River. The UFO videos are so blurry. Everyone's paying attention to it. Are there UFOs? Is that real footage in Nevada? Do they edit that? Why are you guys talking about UFOs when the whole world is collapsing? It's all an illusion. It's an illusion. And I think this is a perfect comment to demonstrate that we need to be paying attention to what really matters, our finances. Our finances really, really matter. Stay off of Amazon. Stop ordering Prime packages. Just stop. There's still time. There's still time. I'll shut up. Jack,
all I'm saying is, if I'm an alien species and I come and observe the Earth and I see the world securitizing buy now, pay later debt and selling it to pension funds, I am going to wipe out this world before this silly species spreads and develops faster than light travel for the benefit of the galaxy. So
I probably just turn around and go home. Yeah. And put a big fence around them so they can't go further. Yeah, exactly. All right. Back to the next segment.
Take it away, Jack.
All right. This is my turn. All right, guys. I saw something interesting this week. All right. I saw a couple of stories. And I want to first paint a picture. Do you guys remember the story, The Big Short, the scene from The Big Short, right? All financial YouTube videos lead to The Big Short or reference it one way or another, right? The scene where Steve Carell and his guys are in the car with the realtor and they're driving through the neighborhood in Florida and they're saying, oh, these people look motivated and these people look motivated. And Steve Carell says, wow, a lot of people appear very motivated. Hint, hint. And the realtor says, it's just a little gully. Don't worry, it's just a gully. Well, I see a couple of people look motivated right now, and it's in the commercial real estate space. And recall, guys, the reason commercial real estate is this slow motion train wreck is because most of Wall Street is just pretending it's not happening. It's happening whether they admit it or not. But as far as valuations on balance sheets and the way the debt is being booked, they're basically not marking any of these assets to market. They're just avoiding price discovery. And I saw some things this week. I saw some common threads between two seemingly unrelated stories that made me think maybe that avoidance of price discovery is going away soon. And so it started with this article in The Real Deal about this tower in New York. My goodness, this tower in New York. There was a lot of hyperventilating on Twitter about this one over this week. Some of it was misplaced. Some of it was accurate. Midtown Tower sells for a big discount on auction site 10X. UBS sells a 920,000 square foot building on West 50th Street. This is like a few blocks from Wall Street in New York for $8.5 million. All right, guys. First of all, 920,000 square foot building for $8.5 million. They sold this building for $9.24 a square foot. That's less than the price of hardwood floors on a per square foot basis. The whole freaking tower sold for that. All right. So the valuation here, astronomically low. Going to read a little bit. Going, gone. A nearly 1 million square foot Midtown office building has sold at a steep discount, fetching just $8.5 million on the auction site 10X. Almost a million square foot building selling on an auction site on 10X. That's kind of a joke in and of itself there. However, the loss was not necessarily as large as it initially seemed because the seller, Swiss bank UBS, they recovered most of their $332 million investment when they leased the ground underneath the building for $286 million to Safehold in 2019. This is kind of an awkward setup here where they've signed this long-term lease for the land that the building sits on. So this $8.5 million number, it's a little deceptively low. Don't focus in on the price as much because I think most of the value is in the leasehold of the land. But there was one comment in here that I really wanted to zoom in on here, and it was this comment. UBS's perspective was, we need to sell this quick. We've kind of made peace with this. It's going to be a big loss. We need to sell it, and we need to move on. Now, this is UBS. This is Big European GSIB bank, they just gobbled up the leftovers of Credit Suisse. It's one of the biggest banks in Europe now. But wow, don't they seem very motivated? We need to sell this quick. We've made peace. This is going to be a big loss. We need to sell it and move on. So that was interesting. They didn't care that they only got $9 a square foot for this tower. They're a very motivated seller. And on the same day that this article came out, we had this article in Bloomberg. Deutsche Bank is unloading $1 billion in U.S. real estate loans. Deutsche Bank is trying to offload up to $1 billion in U.S. commercial property loans off of its balance sheets, just as rising interest rates have dented profits in its real estate portfolio, according to people familiar with the matter. Recall, guys, that Deutsche Bank set aside something like €1 billion for loan loss provisions in their most recent earnings call. Deutsche Bank got clobbered in their stock off of losses in U.S. commercial real estate, and here they are selling a $1 billion portfolio of those loans. The Frankfurt-based bank is marketing the loan book to unlock some capital relief, said one of the people who asked to not be identified because the details aren't public. Deutsche Bank is a big dealer, is a big lender to developers of U.S. commercial real estate and especially offices. It had $16 billion in loan exposure to U.S. commercial real estate at the end of the second quarter, with $7 billion of that linked to offices. And here they are trying to sell $1 billion of it. So we've got a European GSIB is cashing out $1 billion of their loans. They look very motivated. It's a European bank dumping U.S. office, right as on the same day we had another European bank saying, hurry up and sell this building in Manhattan quick. Again, a lot of people seem very motivated. And when I see two big European banks dumping U.S. office CRE loans at the same time, I got to notice that. So guys, be on the lookout for this in the coming weeks. European banks dumping U.S. office. Is this a new trend, or is this just a coincidence that these two stories popped on the same day? I don't know, but I like to look for common threads between articles here. And as I said in the beginning, a lot of people seem very motivated. And this could mean if the big banks are about to start dumping this exposure, it means two things. It means, number one, price discovery is just around the corner. So maybe we finally do find out what these buildings are worth. Hint, it's a lot less than they're keeping them on the books. And number two, pay attention to who they're selling them to. Watch out for your pensions, guys. Hide your kids, hide your pensions, because they're looking for a new owner to buy this toxic sludge. I told you I'd be quick with this one, guys. That's all I got for commercial real estate.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I was reading Rudy's note today as well, and I forget who did it, but there was a huge analysis where somebody, it was at Tripp, I think, went through like hundreds of the bank's balance sheets and income statements and did this analysis. Because the thing about it, guys, is even if you know how to read an income statement and a balance sheet, these folks have gotten really good at hiding this exposure. And I think, Jack, you did a story before when you were talking about the pension funds as well, like with the CLOs those collateralized loan obligations, where the exposure actually ends up, because it's like this scene in The Big Short, the casino scene with Selena Gomez, with all the people behind her, that she makes one bet and everyone else behind her is betting on her bet, and then they're betting on other people's bet, and it just keeps going on and on. So it's very difficult to see where all this exposure lies. But what they came down to is that Deutsche Bank had the largest exposure by far. So, they had some issues during the GFC in mortgage. I think we're about to see, issues on the CRE side as well. And to your point, Jack, it's going to come. The banks are going to be hit hard, but at the end of the day, it's going to be us. It's going to be mom and pops that are really going to suffer when when true price discovery happens. And that wasn't a question.
No,
good question, Melody.
Travis, what do you got, brother? Should we bring Mitch back on for this?
That's what I was saying. That's what I was going to say. I don't know if we should bring Mitch back on. I don't know if he went to the private chat, but Mitch, can you hear us? Raise your hand if you can hear us. He wrote, I was like, yeah, he can hear us. He wrote a private comment. He hit it well on. Do you guys want him to come on to the roundtable?
Sure.
Mitch.
We're putting him on the spot here, but it'd be great if we
could.
All right,
Mitch, sorry for putting you on the spot. Do you want to help us with this roundtable?
Sure. So a couple of things. Jack, everything you said is 100% accurate, but again, it's worse. First of all, you have to understand what the ground lease really means. The ground lease is only predicated on the value received from the building. The value received from the building is disintegrating. The average occupancy in New York is less than 70%. These office buildings cannot be operated profitably if they are below 85%. New construction office buildings in Manhattan are, give or take, pushing around $120 a foot in rent. The older buildings, give or take, are hovering around 70, and they still can't make the math work because the operating expenses, heat, air conditioning, employees, based on the size of the floor plans, based on the floor plates, based on the age of the building and the HVAC systems, means that they cannot be operated at a profit. So then you get into the question, what's it really worth? Well, the answer is land minus demolition.
Wow.
And I know this for multiple reasons, but you're now in my world. And I had a banker call about a month ago out of downtown Denver. He happens to know that we're very much involved in adaptive reuse projects. So he said, we'll finance this building. You don't need to give me $1. You just say you want it, it's yours. Those two buildings that he called on are the spit image of the Bass Brothers buildings in downtown Fort Worth. You would swear it's the same architect. And these things are just dripping in opulence. They're beautiful buildings. Here's the problem. Downtown Denver, 30% occupied, 387,000 square feet. What's it worth? So we sat down, I ran my performance, took it over to Leslie, she double checked, and she said, this is crazy. And I said, yeah, but it's the economic reality. You can't operate the building. So we figured out if we bought the buildings and sat on it for 10 years, it literally would not make 10 cents in profit. So then we sat down and said, okay, fine. Given the size of the floor plates, what if we notch a C-section out of the middle of the buildings and turn it into multifamily? Nice idea, stupid in reality, because it was $522 a square foot to knock a C-section through the middle of these buildings. That clearly didn't work. So then the question becomes, what's it really worth? Well, the answer is land minus demolition.
Mitch,
In other words, you want it sold, write me a check.
I think we're going to get some merch with that, Mitch.
Yeah, I was gonna
some shirts, that
Mitch, take a look, man. What do you think about this comment? This is where Melody's going. Mitch is a professional doomer. I would change it to realist, but all right, give him a hat. I don't know if we should make a hat. I mean, Melody and I were thinking the same thing. We're making this man a hat.
It's not every day I'm told I'm not being negative enough. That is the profound statement.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one.
So let me give you a couple of numbers real quick, Mitch, since you mentioned that 70% occupancy thing. This building in particular on, I think it was West 50th Street, 35% occupied, which, we're doomers here. So we don't say 35% occupied. We say 65% vacant when we hear that number. And what was it? Safehold paid $285 million for that ground lease in 2019. Safehold, that's owned by USI Insurance. So how do you think they made out on that trade? If you're saying land minus building land minus demo is the actual value there, sounds like USI is taking a bath on this.
So the Ford building in downtown Windsor in Ontario was owned by a British company. And I was brought in to a company out of British Columbia. It was an insurance company, and it had a ground lease. So Ford was the tenant. It was an older building, also in what I would call, on a scale of 1 to 10, 6.5 condition. They were all, oh, that's wonderful. We have a ground lease. Yeah, you got a ground lease on a almost 50-year-old asset, and nobody will pay the rent. Well, needless to say, that insurance company had to write a check to get out of that ground lease. It disintegrated. And that's basically what you're looking at. So your 35% occupied building is the exact same thing as the one in downtown Denver at 30%. The bottom line is the ground lease isn't worth the paper it's written on. Now, you could say, okay, eventually we'll straighten it out. Somebody will buy the land, somebody will tear it down. But you see, the two things have to merge. The people that hold the ground lease in reality have to get the building. Then they've got to decide, are we going to operate this piece of garbage or are we going to tear it down? A few months ago, the Hilton Times Square is going under demolition because the land under the building was worth more than the building. It couldn't be operated at an economic level. And that story is going to repeat itself time and time. In Manhattan, it's going to show up in Dallas. It's showing up now in LA. It definitely showed up in downtown Denver. It's absolutely, these buildings are useless. They're functionally obsolescent and they cannot be operated at a profit.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a quick question, Mitch. I get a lot of comments on my channel every time I talk about commercial real estate. People say, why don't we just turn it into apartments? It seems like such a simple thing.
No.
That's not really it's easier to knock it down and build a new apartment building, isn't it? At the end of the day.
You don't have much of a choice. So the floor plates, when the floor plates are really large, it's like I said, it was $527 a square foot to not just fee section out of the middle of the buildings. Here's what happens. And this is the reason why what people don't understand. You have fire requirements. If you have a fire requirement where somebody's got to get out of a secondary bedroom in an apartment, okay, that means that balcony has to be accessible, that glass has to be operable, and your typical multifamily unit, give or take, is somewhere between 45 and 55 feet deep. When your floor plates in an office building create 110, 120 foot deep either side of the building, right? Because give or take, you're 220, 300 feet deep. Well, you can't make it work. Ergo, you've got to knock a C-section out of the middle of the building. The buildings that work for conversion are older, 1945, 1950, 1965 vintage type properties because the floor plates were shallow. However, the problem you run into, if you start with old bones, even though the bones may be beautiful on the outside, they are old bones. The civil and structural engineering inside of those buildings necessary to start putting enough holes in the floor plates to make it look like a piece of Swiss cheese causes structural problems that have all got to be made up. Now you got to go into the building, you got to shore up every single floor all the way to the roof. The complications of doing that, if you understand the math, create such a point, you just simply throw up your hands and say, this property isn't worth $1. It can't be fixed. It's straight up demolition material. And then, of course, you run into the people that say, well, but it's a historic building and we got to save it. Okay, you get your act together, go away. And when you figure it out that you've got a piece of garbage on your hands, then come back and talk to me. And then, Travis, just this week, I sent you the blue skin building in downtown Dallas. You couldn't get a better prime example. I had a chance to buy that thing in 2008 at $650 a square foot. It just sold. The guy who bought it 6 months ago is on bankruptcy's doorstep today. He bought it for more than I had it optioned for. And we never pulled it through because we found it had asbestos and I wouldn't touch it. But it doesn't have parking. He doesn't know what to do with it. He bought it just recently, 7 months ago, and now he's broke.
Travis, can you link the the Dallas video to this in the show notes to this?
Yes.
Because I think our trip around, Mitch, if you didn't see that video, which you should check it out if you didn't, was a kind of a tour de force in vacant buildings in Dallas, commercial buildings. And, you know, one thing I often say is I'm bullish bulldozer and demo, because I do think that really, because of all the things you've just said just now, that there are no other options for these buildings. And the problem is our leaders aren't just getting to that solution because there's so much more grift on the, you know, in other solutions, right? That 42 billion or whatever that Biden was talking about in terms of, you know, converting commercial real estate to affordable housing. So, you know, I know, and we all know that. So instead of our leaders sitting down and saying, okay, what is the real solution to say downtown Dallas and what's going on there with your new high rises, your vacant buildings where, you know, Travis and I saw things like strollers and kid, because the homeless were living there, obviously. So it's like our leaders have not been incentivized to really solve the problem. They're being incentivized to actually not solve the problem. And I think this goes back again to how important it is for us to stand up in our local communities where this is happening.
Yeah, unfortunately, the bottom line is that the politicians can't add 1 and 1 and they don't give a damn about the citizens. That's the reality.
Right.
So power in numbers, these people have to be thrown out of office, regardless of your political bend. The bottom line
Right.
is, it doesn't matter whether you're left or right, right up the middle. It doesn't matter. Theft is theft. And you talk about these municipalities. If you're a developer, you see the impact fees. You see the cost per meter when they say, well, we need a meter fee at $25,000 a meter. All that is a pass-through that goes to the pocket. So pass-through basically means you, the buyer, you, the renter, are having to pay these add-on costs as part of you acquiring that multifamily to live in, or you acquiring that house to live in, or you acquiring that commercial property to get a rate of return on. Those add-on fees at this point in the economy are enough to bankrupt, give or take, as I said, 37 to 40% of who's ever involved in that particular entity.
That's just insane. Well, Mitch, thank you for coming up on this segment. That was invaluable information and great to hear from an expert like you. You know,
Welcome to my hell.
Exactly. Well, but we hear there's just so much narrative out there. That's why we're really trying, we have a slogan. It's called Math Matters. And that is because we absolutely believe it matters and the details matter. And it's people like you that have the details that can, this narrative that's going around that you'll hear everybody regurgitate back to you. They've never looked into it for 5 seconds, because if they did, they would understand how ineffective it really is. But again, yes, Travis is bringing up your website. Everybody, please come, go to Mitch's website, check it out. Together we can make a difference. But our next segment is going, of course, there is just so much doom going around this week. We're going to talk a little bit about the geopolitical activities out there, with recent announcements last night that ships were being deployed to the Middle East. And what I'm doing, because again, guys, on my screen, you're going to see a Substack of Dr. Pippa Malmgren. And as I was sort of talking about at the beginning of the show, it is impossible for us to be experts in all of these areas. Travis, Jack, and I, Mitch, we cannot be experts in all things. We are experts in what we know, and we can provide that information. But we also have intellectual rigor. And what does that mean? We know how to ask questions. We know how to push at narratives, and we also know how to do math. And so what I try to do in subjects where I don't have the time to spend because I'm so busy spending it elsewhere is find those people that have the same intellectual rigor and highlight them for you guys to use as resources. So what I brought up today is Dr. Pippa Malmgren's Substack. Now, her and her father are very interesting people. They've been involved in various presidential administrations. Her father, Harold Malmgren, was part and parcel of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and essentially was there with Kennedy during all of those negotiations. Her mother actually taught Tolkien how to read Middle English, which he needed when he was writing The Lord of the Rings. So just a very, very interesting family. She has worked, I think, with George W. Bush, but she is connected to a lot of these she just has a ton of connections in this world, in DC, and she has her finger on the pulse of geopolitics. And so she wrote this on July 7th, and it's called The Geopolitical Avalanche. And what she's been arguing for some time is that we have been in active war. She calls it the Cold War in hot places and the hot war in cold places, because you can look at things that are happening in space and underwater with different countries to understand that we have been in active conflict for some time. And so I just wanted to point her out as a reference because she is someone who is always ahead of the curve about what's going on geopolitically, and it has said that we really need to start paying attention. So somebody else will probably put in the show notes as well. But getting to exactly what's happened yesterday, I want to open this up for the team here to talk and the community. Is we learned late yesterday, and some people feel that was not that that happened for a reason, that we were hearing about these geopolitical events late yesterday after such uh, distress in the markets. But we heard that ships are being deployed to the Middle East, and that was yesterday. And so I want to talk a little bit about, Jack, you led off at the beginning with, this is precipitated by some, strikes and killing of leaders of Hezbollah and Hamas. And so basically it's, the U.S. is going to be standing with Israel in the event there is an attack. But anything, Jack, what do you think when you got this news? What thoughts did that bring to mind?
So we're largely expecting some kind of retaliation over the next few days, weeks, right? They basically told us there's going to be some kind of retaliation by Iran and Hezbollah against Israel. And we are sending naval assets. Well, like we talked about, the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, Ticonderoga class cruisers, Arleigh Burke class destroyers, a squadron of ground-based fighters. Those are going to be probably either F-15s or F-35s that we're sending there. So the last time we saw some type of a major missile barrage from the Iranians, they launched several hundred projectiles. Almost all of them were intercepted. It was largely viewed as a nothing burger, if you will. Very successful interception rate for the U.S. assets. I mean, militarily, we're learning from the Red Sea and from these Israeli engagements that our interceptors are really good. I mean, the Navy has done a fantastic job of protecting itself over the last few months. They have not secured freedom of navigation through the Red Sea. We're losing commercial ships. Several have been sunk, both by airborne drones and missiles and seaborne drones. So the overall goal of the mission has not been a success. I would stop short of calling it a failure again, because really what this is a test of our naval equipment. Hopefully not, but it appears to be leading up to a conflict with China. But I want to give you a couple of numbers real quick. I hate to break war down into numbers because we're talking about people's lives, but let's just talk about the finances for a second. All right. A Shahed drone that the Iranians have been launching against, and the Houthis have been launching. It's a $20,000 drone with like a 7-kilogram warhead on the nose of it, right? 20 grand each. And they're launching these things in swarms of 100 at Israel. We're intercepting them with Standard Missile 2s, $2 million each. Standard Missile 6, $4 million each. An SM-3 missile, $9 to $28 million each. If you're talking about fighters intercepting them, they're probably using AMRAAM missiles, $1.1 million each. Do you see the numbers here? Do you see the math of what we are spending? Even though very successful intercept rates, we're burning cash at a drunken level. And we're sending multi-million-dollar interceptor missiles to intercept $20,000 drones. These are missiles that we're learning we can't build very fast because of the chips that go into them. We're building these massive new chip factories here, but ask Intel how that's going. Their stock dropped 30% yesterday. So we're exhausting ammunition stockpiles of very advanced, very expensive equipment to intercept very low-tech equipment we can't replace. And this is not sustainable, what we're doing here. And hey, the larger threat, I think most people would probably agree, the larger threat looming on the horizon is the South Pacific and China. If we're firing all this stuff off, getting involved in the Middle East, it weakens our position globally. And that's all. I hate to reduce this down to numbers and dollars when we're talking about war, but that is a factor.
Yeah. And guys, one thing I want to mention too is that these things so when you get a lot of these stories out there in the media, there is a lot of narrative and we are trying, and a lot of effort to kind of focus us on certain things. What I'll tell you about this story though, is it has, a lot of this has been happening and there hasn't been much coverage of it, and it is escalating. And it is time, I believe, to start paying attention to these events. Lebanon right now, they've just issued an embassy alert to get people out of Lebanon. And so this is escalating. A lot of people would say not quickly, because this is what some may have thought the outcome was going to be for some time. So, but this, to Jack's point, it looks like we are, we can't afford this. It's not sustainable, but it's as we are being pushed forward to it. And so we do need to be paying attention. And also, I want to quickly mention the story of the reporter from the Wall Street Journal coming home as well is another good example of a story that has a ton of layers that you want to dig into. What in times like this, what was this exchange about? And a very interesting tweets out there that is also a very multi-layer story, and that are what they would call a limited hangout. And that's a term where essentially our intelligence agencies give us a little piece of the truth, and typically that is for their own purpose to kind of sell a different narrative. And so there's just a ton going on out there that we can't talk about, but I just encouraging everybody not to take the stories just at face value. There's always so much more going on in the back end. But Travis or Mitch, I just kind of want to, any thoughts that you want to share about, these are late breaking developments that we don't have a ton of information right now. We can only speculate about what's to come.
I'll just be short and I'll give it to Mitch, because you know that I hate talking about geopolitical, anything political, because usually it's just designed to divide us. And then our opinions sound crazy to some people. We're distracted from the real issue, our households, our families, our well-being, our peace of mind, the relationships in life. But it is getting to a point where I don't know how not to talk about it, and again, I'll be quick, but the two things that it really hit me, because you guys know I've been on the road trying to catch up, right? I got the whole whistleblower video I got to do. It scares me because it reminds me of September 11th and the deceit there. I worry, Melody, that because I'm near a border in Texas. And my worry is that it's possible to have a terrorist event even localized. I hope it doesn't mess our elections up. It does scare me. But what really hurts about what you and Jack just said, and I think this is really what we should be focusing on here as human beings in the world. No one's talking about the innocent lives. We're talking about how much money, these massive profits that only a handful of people are making, because people get filthy rich off of the loss of innocent lives. And I just don't like talking about it, because the fact is what about all the people? What if the mothers, fathers, children that are making their deaths and carnage is making people rich, and it's completely disgusting. That's all I have.
Can I add one more point there, Travis? Our fleet in the Red Sea, and again, they've done a phenomenal job. They have protected themselves perfectly. It is only a matter of time before one of our boats gets hit. I don't know what the hell we're doing in the Red Sea. We're not winning. I don't think we're losing, but we're not winning. But they only have to get it right once. We have to be perfect. And we're launching these multi-million-dollar interceptors to protect our boats. They're sitting there in harm's way. It's only a matter of time before something gets through. They've sent hundreds and hundreds of missiles, and we've been perfect so far. But even a 99.9% intercept rate, that 1,000th missile gets through and it kills somebody. So I don't know what we're doing there, but we better figure it out. And the admirals have already started to warn about this. The politicians are fighting. They're making our guys fight with one arm tied behind their back again. We've seen how that ends. History has shown us how that ends. So I guess I'll stop there. I don't want to get too political, but
right.
You're muted. Travis.
Yeah. So hi. One has to stand back and look at how governments are participating in the manipulation of each other to find the solution. The FBI, the CIA, the internationals, we have no business in monkeying around with other people's political affairs. Ours are screwed up enough. And unfortunately, ours are screwed up to the point where the US government at the moment is extraordinarily weak. And people know it. So if you back up, and to your point, Travis, all the money that's getting spent, and our house is not in order. The people that have been put into power are, for the most part, complete fools. And they will kill their own population because they are sociopaths, right? And definition of a sociopath is somebody that would hurt their own family and their own friends in order to stay in political power. And that leads to the manipulation globally in places where we have no business being. I can assure you, The Israelis are very capable of looking after themselves. Give them the tools, stand back. Do not hold them, and you solve the problem. Because it's not just the Israelis. The Jordanians are right beside Israel. Egypt is right beside Israel. Nobody wants to put up with this crap from Iran. But I will point you back to Obama as when this most recent nonsense started. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And it is the truth that, yeah, our sources are manipulating other governments. It's okay to have spies in other areas. It's not okay to be manipulating governments and manipulating people. I'd rather much have Iran as a trading partner and be able to work with them than having them bomb and do what they're doing in Israel and Jordan, for that matter. So it's our fault for manipulating them in the first place. And we can expose the manipulations that are going on, but we are where we are. And until you tell the truth and until the people, us, everybody puts the right politicians in place and is not afraid to throw them out of office, this nonsense will continue.
Well said. Well said, sir.
Well said. Trav,
I'm
ready to take us?
No, it's you, girl. You ready to take us
No,
out?
but
Are you
usually
ready to
hand it
comment?
back over to me, but sure.
No, you're doing great. No, we're good. You know, we're about 2 hours in. Whatever you'd like to do, if you want to get us out of here, a big shout out. Wanted to say thank you to Austin. He's been a huge supporter, not just with the channel, but boots on the ground. He has taken us, like I said, to the abandoned community. So, you know, I just want to say thank you to the community of Real Estate Mindset, Nobody Special Finance, Melody, Mitch, you know, us all coming together. It's very powerful. You know, as Mitch is saying, the power in numbers. I mean, we wouldn't even have met Mitch if it wasn't for YouTube and the people, not even us three here. I think it's just beautiful what we have going on here. I think the community growth is excellent. I hope that we can continue to give back the value that we receive. And that's just saying, you know, Melody, do what you need to do, girl. I'm with you, man.
Well,
Just doing what to do.
Jack, did you want any last words before?
Just one more time to thank Mitch for, number one, what you're doing, looking out for the common person. I think you're doing a massive public service. And number two, for sticking around for the entire 2 hours. That was an unexpected treat, and you really added a whole nother layer to the segment on CRE that was unexpected and above and beyond what you signed up for. So thank you very much for that as well. And I'll shut up now. Thank you, Mel. Take it away.
Yeah. And again, thank you so much, Mitch. And I look forward to how we can all collaborate in the future and get this message out. And, you know, what Travis was saying, I think is very important. When Jack and Travis and I sat down to think about our vision and mission statement and what we wanted DNN to be, you know, we really came down to creating an empowered community that can change the world. I mean, that is what we really hope to do here. And that truly is our mission, to not just give you the unvarnished truth, which others want to call doom, to not just give you the math, which others want to call doom. What math is, the universal language, guys. It's what we all understand. What we're really trying to do is change the world. And we can do it. We believe that we can, through you, through this community. It's not through each one of us. So again, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for joining us. You know, please join us again next week. And just always remember, guys, number one, you're not alone. You're not alone. And we're in this together. But number two, math matters.